heard about this roundabout a while ago because I knew they did something unique with it when they built it. And originally I was just going to make a short video about what they did different, but after what I saw when I visited in person, I had so much more to explain than I originally intended. This roundabout is in Miami, Florida, and it was only built a few years ago to fix a notoriously dangerous intersection. But to find what I was looking for, I knew I needed to go in person and experience it for myself. So that's what I did. When I got to the roundabout, sure enough, I found what I was looking for. Traffic lights. Typically, roundabouts don't have traffic lights. That's kind of the point. They're supposed to function without them, with entering traffic just yielding to traffic in the circle and pedestrians in the crosswalks. As a result, things typically stay moving at all times and can help greatly with vehicle and pedestrian efficiency. Since pedestrians have the right-of-way, they never have to wait on a walk sign like at a traffic light and are always prioritized first in roundabouts. That is, if the traffic actually stops, which is something that traffic engineers have been trying to improve upon. Typically, the best way to get drivers to stop in general is with a traffic light. It's widely understood, legally enforceable, and for the most part, well respected by drivers. But they aren't typically seen at roundabouts, and this is why I was so curious to see how this roundabout would function with them. Typically at roundabouts, the crosswalks are set up like this, crossing the entrance and exit of the roundabout in two different segments. For pedestrians, this is a good feature since they only have to cross one direction of traffic at a time. Additionally, nearly every roundabout in the US is only 1 or 2 lanes, meaning you're typically only crossing at most 2 lanes of traffic at a time. At roundabouts without too many cars or too many pedestrians, this works fine. But a problem can arise when a roundabout begins to have more cars and more pedestrians. How do you ensure that drivers will be stopping for pedestrians? One of the most common solutions are these signs with these flashing lights, which are called rectangular rapid flashing beacons. They're activated when a pedestrian pushes the button, and they immediately start flashing to alert drivers that they need to yield to a pedestrian crossing. Once the pedestrian has cleared the crosswalk, drivers can continue on, and for the most part, these work just fine at roundabouts. However, these are just warning lights, meaning they aren't legally requiring drivers to stop. So in some places where they want a more definitive enforceable way to get drivers to stop, they've installed pedestrian hybrid beacons, also known as hawk signals, at crosswalks and roundabouts. These are legally enforceable like a regular traffic signal, but aren't technically a traffic signal. They're activated by a pedestrian pushing the button, which starts with a flashing yellow warning light, which then changes to a solid yellow light, and finally a double solid red light, which is supposed to be treated like a normal red light, at which then the pedestrian receives the walk signal. After a few seconds, the light begins alternating flashing red, which means drivers can go after stopping if the crosswalk is clear, as the pedestrian signal begins counting down. In theory, this should be a great solution, since it provides a protected crossing phase for pedestrians using a legally enforceable traffic signal, and it allows drivers to continue on once it's clear. But the problem is these signals are inherently confusing for a ton of drivers. A recent survey of American drivers and pedestrians found that only 23% think this signal is easy to understand and clearly communicates what drivers should do. Also, since they have two separate phases of first the flashing yellow warning phase and then the solid yellow phase, it makes pedestrians wait at least 10 seconds before they can begin crossing. A recent study found that 44% of pedestrians don't even bother with activating the signal, and instead just cross when they deem it safe. When most roundabout crossings are only 1 or 2 lanes at a time, it would be naive to expect pedestrians to wait 10 seconds for their walk signal when they can just walk across when it's clear. So when most roundabouts have either just a sign, the rectangular flashing beacons, or the hawk signals, I really wanted to figure out how the roundabout in Miami works with actual traffic signals. This roundabout has a lot of vehicle and pedestrian traffic, so these signals were likely installed as a way to ensure that pedestrians have a safe way to get through this intersection in a way that drivers can clearly understand. And in theory, it does exactly that. Using it as a pedestrian, it turned yellow immediately after I pressed the button, and drivers stopped for the red light, letting me cross the road as designed. At first, I thought this is a good way to allow for safe pedestrian crossings at roundabouts, but this was early in the day and there wasn't much traffic or pedestrians out. At times, it seemed a bit overkill for pedestrians to press the button and activate a whole light cycle just to cross one lane of traffic. And it turns out there were a lot of people who didn't even bother with pressing the button at all. As both vehicle and pedestrian traffic increased later in the day, I began to notice more flaws of this setup. These signals have a cooldown period built into them, so if a pedestrian just activated the signal and you missed it, pushing the button again won't make it immediately activate the signal again. This leaves pedestrians feeling impatient and almost always results in them crossing before the cooldown period was over because they see a gap in traffic. And for pedestrians who press the button and have to wait for no reason, it reinforces the idea that it's not even worth it to use it. For several pedestrians at this roundabout, they didn't even bother with using the crosswalks at all. While it's easy to place blame on the pedestrians for not following the rules, it also indicates this design is somehow failing to accommodate this pedestrian in an efficient way that they have more incentive to cross in a dangerous and illegal way than to use the provided option. For example, this approach doesn't have a crosswalk at the roundabout. Instead, it's moved further down the street. And ironically, despite being the only crossing that has to cross 4 lanes of traffic, this crosswalk doesn't have a traffic signal and instead just uses the rectangular flashing beacons. So for someone wanting to go from here to here, they have to take this path, which explains why someone might take this route, exactly as this guy did. At this point, I had experienced this roundabout as a pedestrian, but what's it like to drive through it? It turns out this is where things get even weirder. But first, I needed to make a quick stop to fill up on gas. And with the free Upside app, the sponsor of this video, I was able to get cash back for doing so. First, I found a gas station nearby with an available offer, and this one in particular was 14 cents of cash back per gallon. So I decided to go there. However, Upside is giving Streetcraft viewers an extra 25 cents for every gallon on your first tank of gas, so you could be earning even more. I claimed the offer, followed the instructions in the app, and filled up as usual, except soon after I got cash back, all from downloading this free app, which is pretty crazy since this is something I would be doing anyway. It's not a confusing reward or point system either, it's actual cash back that you can use to get gift cards or just transfer directly into your bank account. Plus, they have over 100,000 gas stations, grocery stores, and restaurants with available offers, so it's easy to find a place where you can start earning. Upside users are making as much as $280 a year. To find out how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside and use code Streetcraft to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas, or scan the QR code here to claim this offer. And remember, it's a free app, so all you have to do is download Upside and begin earning today. Now with a full tank of gas, I went back to the roundabout, and as I drove up to it, I noticed something weird about the traffic lights. You couldn't really see them. At some of the approaches, you couldn't see them at all, and at some, you could only see them at certain angles before appearing dark again. And the reason why comes back to human psychology. In theory, there's nothing wrong with having traffic lights for the crosswalks. The traffic lights allow for controlled pedestrian crossings, and the roundabout functions as usual with a yield sign. But since they're so close, it's not necessarily clear these lights are only for the crosswalks, not for entry into the roundabout. When drivers approach the roundabout and see the green light, they may assume it's good to go and not yield to traffic in the roundabout, which is still necessary regardless of what color the signal is. This isn't an issue for traffic exiting the roundabout, and all of those signals are fully visible because there's no yield sign immediately after to get confused with. But this adds another level of driver confusion. When I drove through it, I wasn't sure if my light wasn't functioning correctly and this pedestrian had a walk sign, or if they didn't bother to press the button and my light was supposed to be green. Additionally, from my brief experience at this roundabout, drivers had a really difficult time understanding the concept of yield, and I'm not totally sure why. I don't think it can be fully attributed to the traffic lights either, especially since this even happened from the approach without any traffic lights. For reference, Miami has tons of other roundabouts nearby, so drivers should be familiar with the concept. Granted, most are these small neighborhood roundabouts, but the concept still remains the same on a larger scale. Not only did 3 different drivers fail to yield to me in the few times I drove through this roundabout, but there were also drivers who would just stop in the middle of the roundabout and continuously let traffic in that was supposed to be yielding to them. Of course, this comes back to human psychology, as most drivers try to avoid actively crashing into people, and in this case, continuing on when nobody is stopping like they're supposed to would probably be a little intimidating. But when this happens, it reinforces the incorrect rules to all of these drivers and creates confusion and distrust in roundabouts. The same thing is happening over here, but this may be partially due to the design of this lane, which is supposed to yield, but it doesn't really fully enter the roundabout either. And the wide curve allows drivers to continue traveling at high speeds. This makes for an awkward conflict point that gets even more confusing when traffic backs up into the roundabout, which I learned is another big issue here. There's a traffic light down here that backs up traffic into the roundabout during times of heavy traffic, which is never ideal in a roundabout. One of the reasons behind this is the way this intersection is set up. There are no turning lanes or left turn arrows, so while both of these lanes go straight, someone wanting to turn left here has to wait sometimes a whole phase before being able to complete their left turn, causing all of the traffic behind them in that lane to wait. Overall, it's clear this roundabout has some issues, but it turns out this is still a major improvement from how this intersection existed before. Previously, all traffic on the main road here was free-flowing, and all of these other minor roads had to turn across multiple lanes of traffic. Lane markings were ignored, and some turning movements were restricted. This intersection was full of conflict points, and the roundabout did help with that. The geometry of a roundabout also naturally allows access to and from all of the roads feeding into it, which increases accessibility for drivers to reach any of these roads without having to make illegal turns or cross several lanes of traffic. But there's more to the story because there was another idea for fixing this intersection before the current roundabout was built.
I'm Aaron DeMeo. My company is Future Vision Studios. We do architectural design, urban planning, and land use, primarily in South Florida and the city of Miami. We determined that this could be a good spot for a roundabout based on the complexity of the different streets that converged into this location. And as a user of this intersection on my bike, walking, and in a vehicle, it was pretty obvious when you move through it how dangerous it was from people speeding through it because of the large turning radiuses. The large amount of pavement allowed people to make illegal maneuvers, illegal left turns, and anyone moving through that intersection, especially more than once, could pretty quickly see how it needed to kind of be refined. And that's how we determined that this one should be prioritized from just the amount of complexity. And then we stepped back and analyzed each of the roads going into the intersection as well to see how maybe those might need to be adjusted and look to create a comprehensive solution to solve the movement patterns of bikes, cars, and people moving into and out of this intersection. We reviewed various layouts for this intersection, and based on the amount of open right-of-way, it's public space that we thought we could work within. And we landed on this shape that looks like a peanut that allowed for all 5 roads to go in and out of the intersection in a safe, manageable way, as well as accounting for a bike lane that would encircle the entire peanut roundabout and also lead out of it, because this is a really critical junction for pedestrians and bicyclists as well because of the I-95 expressway, which blocks a lot of movement into and out of Brickell, which is a very dense neighborhood.
At the same time, the Florida Department of Transportation was also coming up with plans for a roundabout at this location, granted with a slightly different design that included more lanes and didn't incorporate this 5th road.
We took some quick effort and wrapped up the presentation and shared it with the decision makers, the elected officials, and the design team for the project, in hopes that maybe they would see that what we proposed did actually work well and possibly even better than what had been proposed, because it included all 5 roads going in and out of the intersection. And we presented it to them, and we showed up to the public meeting and presented it. There was a lot of people who came and spoke about wanting to see the safety. But unfortunately, because we were pretty late in the process, the construction had been already planned, the resources had been allocated. So at that point, we kind of pivoted and we changed to looking for ways that we could try to improve on what was being proposed. And that included our requests to kind of adjust some of the sidewalk locations to make sure it was a more straight path, make sure that paint was added in certain locations, note when bike lanes were ending or beginning again to make sure that we reduce as many hazards as possible for safety of all the road users. Many of the suggestions that we made on those changes to the plan were implemented, which I'm really grateful that they were, because I think it did make it safer in the end.
Obviously, the current roundabout is already built, and while it is an improvement from what it was before, it also serves as a great case study for 3 different reasons, and it can help guide future projects on what works and what doesn't. First, it highlights the importance of considering the whole area, not just the intersection itself. With this other intersection nearby having flaws of its own, it directly impacts how the roundabout functions by causing backups within the roundabout. If this intersection was modified alongside the roundabout, it could have worked better together as a system rather than 2 individual intersections. Next is the lane configurations. 1-lane roundabouts always have less conflict points than multi-lane roundabouts, and are more straightforward for everyone, but they can also only handle certain levels of traffic before leading to delay. However, it's also crucial to think about who is using the roundabout. For a roundabout placed in a dense urban setting with lots of pedestrian use, it may be worth a few extra seconds of driver delay during rush hour for a design that is safer and works better for pedestrians at all hours of the day. While reducing delay is often a huge priority with projects, it must be balanced with safety. Along with this project also gives us insight on considering the way multi-lane roundabouts are marked. This lane in particular is a good example. While this lane must yield to traffic already in the roundabout who may decide to enter this lane, many drivers proceed as if traffic inside the roundabout will be entering this lane. Of course, these drivers have no idea which lane the other drivers need, and this introduces an additional variable and potential conflict into this design. This lane is also shaped in a way that doesn't require drivers to slow down and allows for higher speeds while entering the roundabout. Finally, it gives us insight as to how traffic lights work for pedestrian crossings in roundabouts. And ultimately, I think the answer is less about the lights themselves and more about the roundabout. The reason most roundabouts don't have traffic signals is that they simply don't need them. Typically, the geometry of the road results in slow vehicle speeds, and combined with short crossing distances allows for drivers to easily yield to pedestrians when they're crossing and continue on their way once they're done. Adding in things like traffic lights and even hawk signals further complicate things, leading to people getting impatient, frustrated, and confused. Sometimes the best solution is just slowing down and paying attention, and there are tons of ways we can change our roads to do just that, which I go into depth with in this next video here. Thanks again to Upside for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out the link in the description.